Finally, for decades, the United States has been selling bombs to Saudi Arabia, and this month, Saudi Arabia finally sent us a bomb of their very own. No, I'm not talking about American Airlines Flight 11. Desert Warrior is a Saudi-produced historical action film with an epic-scale budget to match of over $150 million. $150 million is a princely sum, and I do mean princely. NBC Group, who produced the film, is majority owned by PIF, the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Saudi Arabia, which is chaired by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And what did bin Salman and NBC get for all that money? A box office bomb of historic proportions. American ticket sales have failed to crack $1 million. Middle Eastern audiences also seem unimpressed, with total sales across the region totaling just under $250,000. Even Saudi audiences seemed unenthusiastic, with total domestic sales of about $87,000, which makes Desert Warrior the 8th most popular movie in the country in its opening weekend. Not great. This movie was meant to be a calling card, something to signal Saudi Arabia's arrival onto the international movie scene. Bin Salman, like all great tyrants worth his salt, is a self-proclaimed movie buff who has expressed interest in taking Hollywood on at their own game. In a bid to build up Saudi filmmaking knowledge, NBC hired an impressive array of Western actors and creatives. We have Aisha Hart as the titular Desert Warrior, Princess Hind. Anthony Mackie of Avengers fame plays the rascally bandit Han Sala. Oscar-winning actor Ben Kingsley plays the villainous Emperor Kisra. They brought in real movie professionals, is what I'm saying. So what went wrong? Well, a lot of things, as it turns out. The story centers around the historical Battle of Dikar, a pre-Islamic battle between the Sasanian Empire and Arab tribes, an event Western audiences know probably less than nothing about, which is fine if you're not trying to cater to Western audiences. But the movie is staffed primarily with Western talent, and it stands to reason that they were relying on some of that name recognition of that Western talent to bring in audiences. So if this movie is not for Western audiences, and it didn't do well in its own region, then who's this movie for? Me, as it turns out. Actually, might be surprising given my whole vibe through this video so far, but I really liked Desert Warrior. I thought it was a lot of fun. I love action movies, I love history movies, I especially love history movies that deal with some more obscure moment in history. I even like history movies. Historical inaccuracy doesn't really bother me as much as some film buffs. I always see it as kind of a fun little project to go and do the reading after the movie and kind of compare the film to the actual events. And if the people who made the movie feel they need to change around some of the events to make the movie better, I'm okay with that as a creative choice. I mean, I liked how the Ridley Scott Gladiator made Emperor Commodus into a supervillain. I liked how the Ridley Scott Napoleon seemed to center the idea that Napoleon was acting the way he did because he was just a big cuck simp for Josephine. In this house, we have no choice but to stan a Ridley Scott-Joaquin Phoenix collaboration. I was a little late to the party, so I had to go pretty far out of the way to catch Desert Warrior as the showings were drying up quickly. Appropriate. But I did manage to catch one last screening a couple towns away, so I threw on my desert gear and I headed on over to catch one of the last screenings at a nearly empty theater. The plot of the movie is pretty basic. Emperor Kisra demands a daughter from every kingdom under his domain as tribute, but King Numan refuses, so he and his daughter Princess Hind flee into the desert where they meet the bandit Hansala, who helps them escape some Sasanian mercenaries. They bop around the desert, rally some Arab tribes to their cause, and everything culminates in a fantasy version of the real-life battle of Dikar. I'll start with the positives. At its core, a movie is just something to look at. And I think Desert Warrior looks great. I unironically love the cinematography. A lot of the reviews I read made it seem like they were making some sort of Lawrence of Arabia clone, and I don't think that's fair. Sure, we see a lot of sweeping Arabian desert vistas, but for every one of those, we get this odd, prolonged, slow-motion scene of a horse rolling around in the sand. It's just cool stuff. And it's not just the camera work that makes the visuals so appealing. You spend $150 million on a movie and you could throw that all in at CGI. And bless them, but they definitely didn't spend it all on CGI. All that money apparently went into the camel budget, which is great. I love to see real animals and real extras on screen. It's so much better than CGI slop. Okay, now that I've given the movie the praise it deserves, I think we can get a little bit more critical in pursuit of two questions. Why did this thing get made, and what went wrong? Let's talk about the why first. Yes, this is a flashy epic meant to show off Saudi filmmaking prowess, but why the Battle of Dekar? The Battle of Dekar is actually a significant event in the myth-making behind the formation of a pan-Arab identity in the pre-Islamic world. The real battle happened in southern Iraq, at the fringes of the Sasanian Empire in about 605 AD. Emperor Khosrow deposed the Lakhmid king Al-Numan in order to impose direct rule over the Lakhmid kingdom. A coalition of tribes called Banu Bakr rose up to resist the incursion. The victory of the Arab tribes over the Sasanian forces at Dekar Oasis marked one of the first victories of Arab peoples over the Sasanians, and some would argue this marked a turning point in Arab-Sasanian relations prior to the Muslim conquests. So right away, I have questions. First of all, why is every single character made up? The deposed king has a different name. Princess Hind never existed. Certainly no bandit Hanzala. The idea that Khosrow is demanding daughters as tribute is made up for the movie. They even changed the name of the emperor from Khosrow to Kisra, presumably to, what? Avoid legal action from parties that have been dead for millennia? They depict Ben Kingsley's character Kisra as if he is Xerxes from 300. And I think it serves a similar propaganda purpose. The Sasanian Empire was a Persian empire, and it ruled over an area that encompasses modern-day Iran. Now, Saudi Arabia and Iran are political rivals, and in some ways, Saudi identity is formed in contrast to Iranian identity. The story of the Battle of Dekar seen here on the screen in 2026 is playing a similar role to the role it has always played in Arab storytelling as it has for hundreds of years. Just after the battle, the story was retold in poetry. This poetry was recorded by greats like Abu Tamam and became part of the founding text of Arab literature. Here we are in the modern day reliving some of the oldest stories in Arab literature, but they're being adapted by Americans, with American actors, for an American audience. Which brings us to what went wrong here. If you bring in American creatives to excitement up your story, they're going to skip over certain things that make the story work. In the historical narrative, at least as it was told by Arab poets, this was a story of peoples rising up against their oppressor and setting aside their differences, and that part of the story is more or less retained within the American retelling. However, layered on top of that, you have this story that's largely about the liberation of women, and a singular woman rallying her countrymen to her banner. So we have American sensibilities pushing up against the historical reality in a way that sort of undercuts the original narrative of solidarity between peoples. In the modern retelling, we have a more individualistic, singular protagonist who rallies her people to her banner through sheer force of personality. The real-life story is a story of people drawn together through mutual interest, and in that way they forming a shared identity. To my mind, both stories have merit, but when you're receiving a story of the liberation of women from a country notorious for the oppression of women, it rings somewhat hollow. So, who thought this was a good idea? Well, it falls in line with the same sort of thinking that Saudi Arabia has had for the last 10 years or so. Probably the same people buying up American professional sports like golf and building elaborate sets for American game shows hosted by Mr. Beast. I don't know if this was a direct pitch from Mohammed bin Salman, but it fits into the sort of investments that he's been making on the global stage. You see something successful, and you want to have that success too. So you buy up all the components and bring that thing home. Could Saudi Arabia make big successful movies like Hollywood? Of course! Come on, how hard could it be to hit that quality standard? How great is Hollywood, anyways? I think there are some challenges. Movie theaters have only been legal in Saudi Arabia since 2018. I understand the impulse to want to take shortcuts here and bring in a bunch of foreign talent to tell your own stories. But with those shortcuts come shortcomings. You end up with a story like Desert Warrior, which, again, I must reiterate, I did enjoy. I had a good time. But in terms of its messaging and the way it connected with audiences, it did seem to ring a little hollow. In my mind, when you take all these shortcuts and you patch over the problems with money, you get movies that appeal to only a few select internet weirdos, like myself. And if you're an internet weirdo who liked this video, why don't you kick me a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on another historic bomb of an episode of InfoHazard.